Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Toby Gant. First, a couple of announcements. Great ways to help support Forbidden Knowledge News. Watch the Forbidden documentary, Occult Louisiana, on Toby, Roku channel, and other streaming platforms. Get a Rokfin premium membership at rokfin.com/FKN Plus and get access to all our premium content. And always download our podcast episodes through Spreaker. Today, I want to welcome back to the show Toby Gant. He is a certified holistic life coach, yoga teacher, and soul coach. He discovered the innate ability to calm his mind chatter and listen to his soul's wisdom. This ignited a passion in him to teach others to tune in for themselves and walk in the fullness of their gifts. Toby, welcome back. How you doing?
So good to be here, Chris. Love your podcast.
Thank you so much for coming back on. I enjoy our discussions very much. This is, I think, your third time on here, so welcome back. And we're going to get into the unfortunate, corrupt nature of our government all the way down to local levels. You have some firsthand experience with this, and you'll also be sharing information from a friend of yours that was involved with the California government water division. Lots of corruption, illegal, and sometimes deadly dealings all the way down to our local officials. So lots to get into here. Before we do, it's been a little bit since you've been on. Remind the audience a little bit about yourself and what you're working with.
Well, Chris, I'm going to dive into my previous career history and our stories today. But right now, I am doing what I love, what I'm passionate about. I am a life coach, a soul coach. I help people on the soul level. I work extensively with my intuition to tune into what's going on, help people get to the root of their issues, and really just figure out, what do I need to do to get out of the rut, unstuck, and get in my flow, doing what I'm here to do, doing what my soul came into this world to do. I will say, with the energies happening in the world right now, there are probably a lot of people listening to this podcast who are feeling frustrated and stuck with life path and life purpose. And part of that is because right now the old is getting torn down and destroyed. And a lot of those listening to this podcast are not so much the ones that are here to tear down and destroy. They're the ones who are here to create the new. So your turn is coming. Your gifts are needed. Hang in there. We are getting closer and closer. We're almost there to where you're going to be in your flow doing what you really came here to do and going to be needed. So don't give up.
I love that, man. I share that perspective. I have the understanding that a lot of these systems are crumbling and it's necessary. How far that will take us down some paths that may lead to some dark times, who knows? But I think our perspectives are everything, and what we're doing in our own lives is really going to dictate how everything ultimately turns out, because it has a lot larger effect on things than people realize. But a while back, I put a post on social media asking if there are folks that had information about any kind of corruption, government corruption, education systems, medical system, any of these systems that are fundamentally tainted because of our parasitic ruling class. And you responded, and you have some previous experience yourself. And like I said in the introduction, one of your friends has some experience with the California government, local government, essentially, that we'll be getting into today. So where should we start with this?
Oh, man. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about what I did. I worked for a local nonprofit here in Southern California doing environmental education. And a lot of it was water education. You know, California is a coastal desert, Southern California. So we don't have the most abundant water here naturally. Areas do have a good bit of groundwater. But what we found with the nonprofit I worked for is that there were a lot of channels and opportunities for funding to go out and teach about water. So we worked with a lot of governmental and quasi-governmental agencies to go out and do school education programs about water. The levels and layers of bureaucracy and waste when it comes to water in California are unlike anything you could even imagine. I mean, it's layers and layers and layers.
And just in case you folks didn't know, we live on a water planet, okay? Water is abundant and unlimited everywhere. So just a reminder for that, folks.
Absolutely. But when you get the bureaucracies and politicians and the elites involved, look out. It gets so complex and so multi-layered. I really should do like one of those mind map diagrams to kind of map out how all the layers of water work in California, because I have a hard time wrapping my brain around it. There's county layers and sometimes city layers, and then sometimes they privatize some of it, and then there's state layers. It just gets crazy. But what I found in all of this is I got to know some of the people in the water realm, and I ended up becoming friends with a woman who, excuse me, was elected to one of the local water boards. I won't say which one, and there's so many layers of water. She's on a water board that you don't write your water utility check to or pay your bill to. Let's just put it that way. Right. But there's many, many layers. And she had been involved for quite a long time, and she had a lot of stories to tell. And once we became good friends, she kind of told me a few of those stories. So she served on this water board and, you know, got paid for going to the meetings, got health insurance benefits, all these benefits, but it wasn't, you know, exactly like a full-time kind of salary, but there was some money that went with it. So she had a consulting business on the side. And in her consulting, she would do consulting for other water boards. So she couldn't do it for the one she served on. That would have been a conflict of interest. But she would bid out contracts to do consulting with other water boards. One of the stories that always stuck with me is she did a lot with a particular water board here in Southern California that they had some corrupt board members on their board. And being that she was a board member of another board, you know, she'd schmooze with them and go to all these networking water meetings and things. So she, you know, she had some good opportunity to network. But she told me this one time she had a contract out for bid with this other water board, and one of the board members asked to meet with her about it. And she went and met with him. And he said, you know, if this certain Cartier women's watch for my wife just happened to show up in my house, it only cost $5,000. You know, I might be able to make sure that contract you bid gets approved. So he was really not even beating around the bush much. Like he didn't want the cash. He wanted a certain Cartier $5,000 watch for his wife. I mean, and you know, and the contract was for quite a bit more than $5,000. So she still would have made a lot of money. I did not ask her if she ended up giving him the watch. I just didn't want to know, because I know I love my friend, but she knew how to play the game, and I think she might have played the game a few times. So I didn't want to know. I didn't ask if she gave him the watch or not. But there was so much waste and corruption. So you look at the staff level, and, you know, there's old sayings about people who work in the government. And there's wonderful people who work in the government. But my God, are there ever some useless eaters, to borrow the elite's term, who work in the government? Man, oh man, were there some people there who just took naps until they could retire, you know? And I saw a lot of that, you know. Working in a nonprofit, I had to bust my butt, you know, and run and hustle and hurry. But I'd watch some of these people making amazing salaries doing nothing. And then I would see the corruption of the elected board members who are supposed to govern these agencies. My friend served on this board. I think there were 5 members on the board she served in. And I do remember that one of her colleagues was doing maybe a similar racket to the guy I told you about wanting the watch. I don't exactly know what his racket was, but he actually got caught. So he was, I believe he was evading taxes and also somehow kind of taking money he shouldn't have been taking. His deal might have been taking bribe money from corporations that were bidding contracts with their agency. I think that might have been his thing. But he ended up having to go to jail. He went to jail, lost his seat on the board, all that good stuff. And then my friend, God bless her, love her, good heart. Who knows? She might have done some stuff here and there that wasn't on the up and up. I don't know. But I do know she got investigated. And I also know that the investigation was brought about kind of as like a revenge sort of thing. Like she had made an enemy in the political realm. So they, launched an investigation, took over a year. She had to spend tens of thousands on legal fees out of her own pocket. And she had her laptop confiscated for over a year. So she had to, get a new laptop. She didn't have that one. It wasn't going to be any good to her anymore. But yeah, it took over a year before the investigation was done. No charges were filed. She never went to jail, anything like that. But it's very political. It's very corrupt. It's very dirty. I also remember being in that world. They were always having conferences and meetings and summits, and basically those were excuses for the elected board members and sometimes the staff of these agencies to go live it up on the taxpayer and water rate user dime. And I remember too, watching how they would have corporate sponsors at these water summits and conventions, and they would hold corporate dinners, and these, corporate bigwigs would come in and wine and dine the board members and the staff members. And that's how they got contracts, like multi-million, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes contracts, was through wining and dining and schmoozing. I also remember, this is a little funny, but kind of illustrates the caliber of folks we were dealing with sometimes. I remember one of the board members on my friend's water board, he had to have been 100 years old. I'm probably exaggerating, but he was ancient. And he loved the free buffets at all these events. And he was really, really old. And he'd go not once, twice. I would be in these meetings where they had like a panel of speakers and everyone's got their suits on and they're all official, talking about water policies. And I hear snoring, and I look over, and he's leaned back like this, snoring so loud the whole room can hear. Happened twice at different events. I saw him do that, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is the guy that's, making decisions. Yeah. One of the other things I discovered is that these water agencies sit on, at the time, I remember my friend telling me her agency was sitting on about $90 million in cash reserves. And this was way over 10 years ago. So God only knows what. And hers is like one most people have never even heard of. There are larger water agencies. One in particular, I'm guessing, probably is sitting on billions in cash reserves. And California's got all kinds of infrastructure issues with water. They're always trying to raise water rates. We have some of the highest water rates in the nation. It's different in each city and each jurisdiction, but our rates are just insane. As many of these agencies are sitting on tens, hundreds of millions in cash reserves, and they're always wanting more, always more, always more.
Now, there's several times you mentioned these fat cat board members, various levels of government that you always have these board members. And from what I've heard through various guests over the years and different sources that really can't be confirmed nor denied, that in order to become one of these board members, you're going to have to be a certain member of a certain club. You may have to be involved with things that other people don't normally get involved with, compromised in certain ways. And the higher that you go in any of these governmental organizations, if you want to attain any level of power, you're going to have to do something that goes against humanity in some way.
Yeah. So here's what I'd say about this. This was local, and there were some people who would serve on the board who weren't in a club necessarily. I will say the old guy that would snore in the meetings, he was a retired either school teacher or school principal. He wasn't super wealthy. He wasn't on his way to becoming elite and powerful. That being said, some people use the local water boards as a stepping stone to the next, like then I could get to the state assembly and then maybe I could run for Congress, So they were using it as a stepping stone to get higher and higher up the political ladder. And like you, I would see that most people who were actually able to climb that ladder and take those next steps up the political ladder often were compromised, whether it was financial crimes or taking bribes or what have you. They look for people who are willing to be compromised. They look for willing participants. And it's not hard to find them because a lot of those people, even at the local level, by all means, not all of them are psychopaths, but at the local level is where they sort of use it as a hatchery or nursery for new psychopaths to take to the higher levels of government.
And some people may be listening and maybe thinking, oh, I've heard of worse. That's not so bad. Well, first of all, there shouldn't be any level of corruption when you're dealing with government issues, when you're dealing with any level of political power, governmental control. If you're accepting that there's just a level of corruption, that's a fundamental problem. That's something that is wrong with society. We just shouldn't be accepting that there's a level of corruption. And like you were saying, the further you go up, the more corrupt it gets, the more compromised people are, and the worse things happen behind closed doors.
Absolutely. So here's the good news. As we move into this election season, well, we've been in the midst of it all year, and it is a circus. It is distraction. It is smoke and mirrors. And I think this message is so relevant as we're in this chaotic time. And the election's just over a month from now when we're recording this. But I guarantee it's going to be a tumultuous month, and probably not just until election day. The world and the news is going to be chaotic and crazy and all kinds of twists and turns and surprises. But all of this is happening because, as you mentioned earlier, the old is getting destroyed and crumbled. The old. Now, I am not an astrologer, but sometimes I like to look at what good astrologers, wise astrologers say to just kind of get another frame of reference for what's happening in our reality and in our world. The old song from the hippie era, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius, one of my favorite astrologers speaks about that. And what she says is we've been in this top-down kind of control, ever more increasingly top-down control kind of paradigm. But the age of Aquarius is really moving into a grassroots up. And the age of Aquarius, I don't know, I think it's like 2,000 years total. But there's a specific part of this age right now where the planet of Pluto is moving into the sign of Aquarius. It's been in Capricorn for a long time, which is Earth sign. Now it's moving into Aquarius, which is a very air sign, but it is very much the energy of the new, the energy of the uplifted, elevated consciousness, something that we have never experienced, nor probably have any of our ancestors ever experienced. But it's a rocky ride during this transition. One thing she said is throughout this year, Pluto has kind of been going back and forth between Aquarius and Capricorn. It's on that cusp and kind of riding it and going back and forth. And I think it's somewhere around November 11th, don't quote me on the day, it goes fully into Aquarius for 20 years. And she said, as we move through that 20 years, it's just going to get more and more grassroots up from the people, power from the people, not power concentrated at the top. Mm. So one of the things we got to do as we're looking at all this, like, yeah, it's hard to avoid it. It's hard to not be aware of the corruption and the craziness. But one of the things we have to ask ourselves, and I have to ask myself, are we getting distracted? Are we getting distracted and caught up in the circus and the chaos? One of the things that's so true is this old left-right paradigm is dead. Yet there are people who are death gripping, clinging to it. Like, I've always been this party or that party. I'm left progressive. I'm conservative, right? Let it go, because those things don't mean anything anymore. They don't mean anything. And the more we cling to that old paradigm, the more we stay stuck in that.
See, people don't know how to let it go. I let it go years ago. I look back because every once in a while I like to check in and see the theater that's unfolding, the chaos, how people are reacting to things. And I have a talk show that's based on social commentary and the high strangeness that happens in the world. So I like to have a basic idea of what's folding, although I have come to the awareness that it is all theater. It's all divisive tactics to keep us reliant on daddy government and in a constant state of fear so that we don't know too much, we don't veer too much off of the path. And this is the control system we are stuck under, which unfortunately our political system is governing this. And like you said, we have these people who are going to live or die by the candidate that they're voting for, and they're going to have faith in this system, unfortunately, until they draw their last breath. This needs to change as soon as possible. This is one of the final frontiers that we're facing as this society stuck in this matrix control system. But at this point, it is completely self-imposed. It's up to us. We've been allowing this system to perpetuate for centuries, and we're the only ones that can drag ourselves out. The question is, how do we do this, especially if you are someone who is so reliant on this system and you can't see any other way? I've had years of red pills being shoved down my throat to get to this point, but what do you think the answer is for your everyday normal person who clicks on the news and pays attention to this like it's going to change their lives?
Well, there's a couple of things. As we move into this era that we can only imagine what is possible right now, we're still in the death throes of this old system. We're still feeling it really intensely as it's dying off. So it can be a little hard to believe that something good is coming because we are creating it. But one of the things we have to do, the old age, as we shift into the Aquarian age, we're coming out of the Piscean age. And the Piscean age was, I need a savior. I need an external savior. The Aquarian age is, there is no external savior coming to save you. The divine power is within you to be your own savior. We are what we've been looking for, but we keep looking externally for it instead of looking within for it. And that could sound like a bunch of new age gobbledygook, or it could be the most empowering thing you've ever heard. It's your choice of what you do with that. If we stay mired in the old swamp of the 3D, we are not doing what we came here for. But the people who listen to your podcast are the people who came with that spark of something to offer, something to do, something to create, some gifts to share in this creation of the new, in this no longer looking to be controlled, no longer looking to be saved by mommy or daddy, but to be the empowered Christ consciousness ourselves, to be that uplifted, empowered, what we came here to be. There is no savior. Stop thinking the red team or the blue team is going to save you, because they're not. Neither one is going to save you. And if you're death gripping onto that, you're not a part of the solution. You're staying stuck in the problem. So I want to share an old fable. I didn't make this fable up. It's old ancient wisdom. It's so old, who knows who even first wrote it down. But it's a fable of the chickens and the eagle. And it goes a little something like this. Once upon a time, there was an eagle who somehow got separated from his eagle family as a baby, a hatched baby. And he ended up being raised with and by chickens. So as an eagle living as a chicken, all he ever saw, all he ever learned were chickens. He didn't have a mirror to look at and see, hey, I look different than these other birds I'm living with. He just adopted their mindset, their ways, chickens peck, peck, peck at the ground looking for worms and insects to eat. You know, their heads are always down, 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 down at the ground. So he lives his whole life thinking he's a chicken, having chicken thoughts, having chicken dreams, doing what all the other chickens do. All he knows is the chicken life. One day he's out in the yard doing his pecking at the ground along with his chicken brothers and chicken sisters, and something catches the corner of his eye, and he looks up and he sees this majestic bird in flight, and it is an eagle, a lone soaring eagle with its huge expansive wing spread. And there's something about seeing that bird that catches him off guard and ignites something within him. And he gets the attention of one of his nearby fellow chickens and says, "Do you see that? What's going on? What is that?" And he's in awe of this eagle. And the other chicken goes, that's an eagle. Don't worry about it. You're a chicken. Just, go back to pecking. Keep your head down. He's just kind of like, disregard it, write it off. And so the eagle just kind of sticks his head back down and goes, okay. He just goes back to his pecking. But there's something in him that was stirred by that. And I think we're kind of at that kind of crossroads here. If you're listening to this podcast, you're an eagle. Even subconsciously, you are seeking out other eagles by listening to this podcast. Yet you're surrounded with chickens. We're all surrounded with chickens. And when I heard that story recently, it really struck a chord with me. For me personally, I'm like, wake up, chickens, wake up. You got wings, start flying. But here's the problem. There are people who are made to be chickens. Drives me crazy. I want everyone to be an eagle. I want everyone to spread their wings and soar. Not all of them are going to do that. They're not. And me as, a soul coach, I want to awaken, I want to empower, I want to light people up, get them going. Not everyone's an eagle.
See, this is a tough message, and it's kind of controversial if you think about it, that there are some people that I wouldn't say are meant to be chickens, but they will never, unfortunately, realize their true potential for one reason or another. And that brings us to the controversial NPC conversation. Are there people that are just part of this reality? A lot of people in this spiritual community like to say that every single person on this planet has a divine spark and the potential to do great things with their incarnation here, but we see so many people that are stuck. And this leads me to something that I had never even considered before just a couple of years ago after being with my wife who has children. I've never had children, but I get a brand new perspective on what people that do have children go through, especially with teenagers and the environment they're surrounded with now. And it's very difficult. There are so many young people, young teenagers that are afflicted with addictions, and they are reliant on pharmaceuticals and the system. Their parents are unfortunately some of these chickens that aren't aware of what's going on. So the kids have no frame of reference or spiritual understanding or foundation to where they have a basic understanding of what's really happening, the corruption, things behind the scenes that makes it a little easier to navigate this realm. But if you are a teenager, a young person, and your parent is unfortunately unaware of those things, it's extremely, extremely difficult. And, in our situation, her child grew up being exposed to this information, but unfortunately rejects it. And I'm sure a lot of young people are the same way. They just want to play their video games, escape from life, do what every teenager does, but the world is becoming insane. And the more you run away from it and try to hide from it as opposed to learning about what's really happening, the harder it is going to be in this reality. And I just have a brand new perspective from parents and what they're going through right now.
Absolutely. So there's things we can control and things we can't. If you look at the substance abuse and recovery realm, the serenity prayer, God grant me the grace to change the things I can and let go of the things I can't control. I'm paraphrasing. There are things we are here to do and to change, and there are things that are naturally by design out of our control. We aren't necessarily here to try to turn chickens into eagles. I want to share, this is something that I learned in church growing up. I grew up in church, and lots of scripture still sticks with me. And if the book of Romans chapter 9, verse 21, it says, does not the potter have the right to make out of the same lump of clay some pottery for special purposes and some for common use? It goes on to say, what if God, although choosing to show his wrath and make his power known, bore with great patience the objects of his wrath prepared for destruction? What if he did this to make the riches of his glory known to the objects of his mercy, whom he prepared in advance for glory? Now, I don't bring like dogma to that scripture, but it always stood out to me like, okay, so some people were made for destruction? Like even as a kid, I'd hear that and be like, what does this mean? I look around, and the way I understand it now, the way it resonates with me now is there are some empty vessels. There are some that don't have the spark of the soul within them. And we can lament that and get real frustrated about it and real angry about it. Or we can go, okay, but I didn't come here to try to control and fix everything. I came here with specific purposes, specific dharma, if you will, soul work that I came here to do. There are those who cannot spread their wings and fly because they don't have wings, or they have chicken wings that aren't designed to fly high up in the sky. I'm not here for them. I'm here for the other eagles. And if we focus on those who do have the wings that are spreadable and ready to fly, maybe they just need a reminder. Maybe they just need help. Hey, you got eagle wings. You can fly. If we focus on those people and on that and on networking, collaborating, hanging out with those people, uplifting and inspiring other people like that, and creating stuff with them, that is where the solutions come from. It's too overwhelming to go, I want to fix all this government corruption. It is getting the wrecking ball taken to it right now. Dynamite, nitroglycerin wrecking ball is coming down on the broken and corrupt system. I'm not one who's supposed to do that. I do think there are podcasters that are part of the wrecking ball. They are wrecking balls. They are part of taking down the old system. I know clearly that's not my role. My role is in creating the new, and that's where I need to focus. I hate seeing that there are kids suffering because their parents are stuck under this paradigm, or that's all they've ever heard themselves. But if you think about it, think about the hard things you had to go through growing up.
I think it's especially difficult for children because, like I was saying, even with my wife's child, she's been awake almost her whole life and trying to teach her children about these things, and he just decided to reject it all, either because he's afraid of it or doesn't understand these spiritual concepts or doesn't want to face what's happening in our corrupt society. Unfortunately, you can do everything you can, but you can't save anyone if they're not ready to learn and accept these things and be willing to grow. Then there's nothing you will be able to do for that person, and that's a very tough lesson.
Tough lesson, but it's also free will. You had free will. I have free will. You went through some hard things growing up. I did. We all did. But those hard things eventually paved the pathway for us to discover what we came here to discover. You know, how many of us also rejected our parents' ideas and beliefs growing up, you know? And only to kind of, I don't say I came around full circle and agree with them on everything now, but I did come somewhat full circle that I'm like, wow, I actually have more in common with my parents than I thought I did. Not everything, because I am my own independent thinker, and there are some things they cling to that don't resonate with me, and that's okay. But I have come around in my mid-40s to go, you know, we got more in common than I thought. What I think is that is something that's out of your control, out of your wife's control. And that is so hard when it's her kid. But At the same time, if you can, okay, I can provide housing, shelter, clothing, safety, but I can't control the mind, nor do I want to. I don't want to control the mind. Right. I want this kid to kind of have his own journey and figure it out. And if I give the space for that, give it to something bigger than myself. It's the same thing with the society and culture around us. This is a hard one for me, Chris. I'm not a parent, but I look around at people around me and I'm like, pardon my language, but wake the fuck up. Can you not see it? It's blatant as the bald head I have or the big nose on my face. It's so blatant, and you're not seeing what's really happening in the system. But then I have to go, they're not all going to get it. Some people are chickens. Some people came here to keep their head down and peck at the ground for worms and bugs. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Chickens lay eggs that we can eat. Chickens make tasty dinner. There's purpose in everyone, in everything. We all serve a different purpose. Your audience is more in alignment with the eagles, though, the ones that came here to remember that we have wings and we came here to fly high in the sky and we came here to be powerful and to create. But powerful doesn't have to mean I'm going to go fix the corruption. Powerful means fuck the corruption. I'm here to create the new. I'm here to create the new. That's what I'm here for. And that's where the empowerment comes. My God, do we all struggle with it? I have been having such a hard time with it lately. Like that. I want to wake them up. I want them to hurry up and wake up. But many of them aren't going to. But we don't need everyone to wake up. We don't need every chicken to try to become an eagle. It's not necessary. For this new energy that's coming in, for those of us who came here to be eagles, the time is coming for us to really fly and soar.
Right on.
And not everyone has to do that to bring in the new, Not everyone has to.
Let's talk about some of the things that are unfolding right now, maybe offer some possible solutions. Over the past year and a half, I've noticed more and more division, especially amongst people within the truth, conspiracy, paranormal communities. There's a lot of infighting, but it stems from the flooding of information, bad information coming out from all angles. It seems like they couldn't get a hold of censorship, so now they're just throwing all kinds of misinformation and bullshit out through the internet, social media, and seeing what sticks, seeing what people latch on to certain stories and perpetuate it, and it just becomes misinformation, but it becomes dangerous for genuine researchers and people who are really just out there looking for the truth and trying to do good work. There's so much bad information out there, it becomes difficult, and it causes a lot of division. It's causing a lot of fighting within our community. I've seen friends that just stopped talking to each other, wrote each other off because of conspiracy theories the past couple of years. It's getting pretty ridiculous.
Well, this is what I'd say about that. The eagle has laser sharp vision. Eagles are hunters. They perch up high somewhere and they just watch for prey, and they can see prey from very far away. The eagle has laser sharp vision. Spiritually speaking, we as eagles who are part of this audience, we don't see so much. If we focus through these physical eyes, we're going to get really distracted and overwhelmed. But if we use our inner vision, that is how we discern. That is how we can tell and feel. I think the biggest tool we need right now is discernment. Discernment is not an intellectual knowledge. It is a heart and soul knowledge. It is not judgment. It is a knowing what is in resonance and what is not in resonance.
I would also add compassion. I think along with that, we have to be compassionate. And just because we don't agree with someone's theories doesn't mean we have to block them, write them off, hate them, or argue with them. We can still share information even though we don't necessarily agree with it.
Yeah. I think one of the hard things, though, I've really been dealing with all of this. I came from a home where judgment was used a lot as a parenting tool. So I find myself falling into judgment a lot. And that's hard. I have to constantly go, I'm doing it again, and clear it out and let it go. But one of the things happened recently, drove me crazy. I had hosted a day retreat at my house and had people over. We did meditation and yoga and had a sound bath. It was awesome. It was great. At the end of the day, people were hanging around and talking, and I was exhausted because I hosted the thing and taught it, all this. One of them said, "I'm reading this awesome book, and it's about AI and all this stuff." And he was like, "The author is Noah Yuval Harari." Now, some in the conspiracy realm will be familiar and some won't. He is a puppet of the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab, and he's a PhD philosopher. They use him to trot out from an intellectual perspective the agenda of, the elites. Yes. And I heard that name and instantly I'm just triggered. And I'm like in my adrenaline mode and I'm shaking and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I said, I probably didn't even say anything wise at all. I probably said, be very careful. That guy is terrible. Instead of like breathing and stopping and going something wise. Nothing wise came out of my mouth because I got tricked. I didn't say anything horrible, but I didn't say anything wise. And I definitely didn't say anything that would have empowered that individual to think at a deeper level. Which I regret. I'm frustrated with. I wished I had just stopped to breathe, and that's probably part of it now. We're all getting triggered, especially over the rest of this year. We're going to get triggered a lot, all of us, especially those of us that understand something's wrong, something ain't right. But if we can stop when we feel the trigger and breathe, don't react. If you breathe, I'm saying this to me too, if we breathe and take a moment, then we can respond instead of react. Responding instead of reacting is going to save you a lot of suffering, a lot of misery. We're not here to wake everyone up. None of us. That's not what we're here to do. If we quit trying to fix and wake up those who are around us that are just pecking at the ground, going along with the narrative, you're wasting your energy. You're getting drained. You're getting depleted. Fix your eyes upward towards the sky. Look for the other eagles and then take off in flight and join them. That's what we're here to do.
You mentioned this upcoming selection season. Any thoughts on how people should navigate the madness? And we're not talking about going out or voting anything, but dealing with the people who do participate with the system, no matter whether we're voting or not, no matter whether we pay attention to any of this or not, the outcome will still affect our lives in some way. There will be some trickle-down effect that will reach each and every human being in the United States. So there are two possible outcomes. Neither of them we would ever be able to control, and neither of them would ever benefit us in any way, but we still have to deal with it. So what are your thoughts on how to navigate through the next few months and years?
Here's what I'd say. It's a hard pill to swallow, but either way, whatever happens will benefit us, because either way, whatever happens is a part of destroying the system, destroying itself, and the further awakening. Every time this bad stuff happens, more people awaken. And me trying to force someone to awaken doesn't work. But the natural unfoldment of events, eventually a red pill, if you will, does work. Certain red pill works on some people, other red pill works on other people. Not everyone is going to awaken in the same way. But 9/11, many years later, looking at that going, a lot of this doesn't make sense. That helped me eventually to start asking some questions. Eventually. Didn't happen in 2001. It was many years later, but that whole event helped to awaken. I live in a state that is very Team Blue's going to save us. Orange Man bad. Like I don't buy into either of those narratives. Like Orange Man's going to save us, Orange Man bad. It's all smoke and mirrors, But I get triggered when I see everyone in my neighborhood has their certain political signs. And I'm like, are you still that asleep that you really think that's going to save us? And it's hard. I'm like, let it go, let it go, let it go. It's so hard. It's so hard. Yet, if we can just stop looking at that and remember what we came here for. What did you come here for? What did I come here for? You're here to awaken and inspire the truth in people, and remember that everyone's got their own journey and that everyone's on a different timeline. I came here to, when I'm on my good days, I came here to look for the other eagles and remind them that they have wings and remind them that they can fly. We got to stay focused on what we came here for. That's what it's about. The new is already, and the new has to start being created before the old is done being destroyed. And we don't, I think a lot of us in this audience aren't the ones who necessarily are here to do the destroying. I think we're the ones mostly here who are here to create the new. So we've got to start creating it already, whatever that looks like for you. I love sustainable agriculture, you know, real regenerative agriculture, you know, buying from local ranchers, all that stuff. But my focus isn't meant to be like owning my own regenerative farm or ranch necessarily right now. That's not what I feel guided to do. So I got to stay focused on what I'm guided to do. What are you guided to do? What are your different audience members guided to do? And how do we bring those gifts and talents together? We got to spend more time not just talking through podcasts, which is awesome, but we got to spend more time with the other eagles in person, face to face too.
Well, you were mentioning how these events, these high impact events, not necessarily positive, at times perceived that very negative can lead to very positive things from the collective. And we've experienced this over the past few years. And I'd love to get your thoughts on these possibilities. I had a guest on a while back, James True, who I don't necessarily agree with everything about this theory, but I find it interesting. He believes that there are those at the very top of magical orders and secret societies and governments and politics above any names that we've ever heard of that are aware more than anyone else and believe that they are steering society and evolving them by putting them through these series of messed up events. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, and if that is what's unfolding, I think that's pretty fucked up. But on the other hand, this is more along the lines of what I intuitively feel could be happening, is that there is a greater force that is in control of things and guiding things that no human on this planet is aware of. Each of us are playing a role and being guided in some way by this force, but we don't necessarily have the awareness of a bigger picture or what the force is doing for us individually. Even the parasitic ruling class is playing their parts. They're doing things for their own selfish reasons and to gain power, but behind the scenes, there's something else guiding them that is forcing them to do things that will eventually benefit humanity. What do you think about that?
I agree with that. I think it ties in with that scripture I read earlier. Did not the Creator make out of the same lump of clay some vessels that were for special purposes and some for common use, some to be destroyed to make the power of his, glory known to the objects of his love and affection? I'm paraphrasing that again, but it's like, there are those that are serving a purpose. Maybe they're not conscious of that, but they're serving a purpose. I do think some seem like empty shells. Like there's not a soul in some people. I don't know how that works. I haven't figured that out, but it feels like there's some people I run into or observe, especially, at those upper levels of being on the stage, that seem to have sold a part of their soul. Or maybe don't have their soul anymore, or maybe we're born without a soul. I don't know how that works. I just know there's some people that don't have that level of depth and potential in them that I see in you, and I see in, other people that I meet, most people that I meet. Well, one thing I think that's coming up that's really important is that this is all spiritual. This is all tied to so many other dimensions and layers of reality that we can't see. The electromagnetic spectrum, visible light is a tiny little sliver of it. We can't see all the other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, like X-rays and infrared and ultraviolet and gamma rays and all that stuff. We can't see that. We don't physically have the ability to detect that, although there's scientific instruments that can. Same thing with the spirit realm and other dimensions. There's so much more going on that we can't detect with our physical human senses. And all of us can perceive some of that to a certain extent. But some people are very empathic and feel a lot and really feel it. And then other people, especially those that are more logic minded, they can feel it, but they tell themselves they can't. They can sense, but they go, I don't feel it the way that crazy woo-woo person over there does. So I must not be wired that way, or maybe that's all a bunch of gobbledygook. I think of my brother. He's a little more logic-minded than me, probably, but he's curious and fascinated by all this stuff, but he doesn't necessarily feel it in the way I do. And I think folks like that sometimes doubt that they have a connection to the greater reality that goes beyond what we can see or hear or smell or taste. So I think it's important that most people who listen to your podcast probably are a little more wired to feel a little more, but there's probably some that are very logic minded that are curious and fascinated, but go, I can't feel that. I can't sense that. It's subtle. It can be very subtle. I will say I'm not the most woo-woo feeling person. I've met people who feel everything. They pick up a rock and they're like, oh, I feel the vibes and energy coming off of it, and I think that's cool. I'm like, man, that must be a pretty interesting way to live. I'm not wired quite that way. When I tune into the other realms or unseen wisdom, divine guidance, I close my eyes, I breathe, and it comes through as what I might say is a fuzzy movie inside my head. It's not HD, crystal clear, Dolby surround sound. It's subtle. It's feeling imagery. It's feeling sound, maybe, if that's but through a muffle. So it's not like crystal clear for me. Although there are people who are wired to get everything crystal clear. It's a little more muffled for me. It's so subtle that for years I doubted it. And then I realized, hey, if I pay attention to this and write it down, there's some real good stuff here. And some of this is accurate and true or helpful for me or helpful for other people. I think if we can realize we're not all wired to super duper feel it, it can be subtle, calm, the way we get the information. But if we can learn to feel it, sense it, trust it, that's how we tap into our greater purpose. That's how we stay on track. That's how we don't get distracted by all this smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. And I'd also say to be aware what you're thinking, because I think we do have this mind antenna that can pick up information from other realms, other intelligences, outside sources that can be very beneficial. And some people may just think, man, that was a weird thought. I don't know where that came from, but maybe you should start paying attention to some of those things. Not necessarily negative thoughts, but something that may be beneficial in your life.
Absolutely. And that's where the discernment comes in. How do you feel with the frequency of the information? Do you feel bad about it? Do you feel good about it? And there's deceptive stuff. There's deceptive energies, entities, and frequencies, but that's where discernment comes in. I can observe that deceptive stuff, but it doesn't I don't feel like I buy into it because I can feel it. I remember one time when I first started having this spiritual awakening, I thought, well, other people have spirit guides. I needed a spirit guide. So I did this YouTube meditation, how to meet your spirit guide. And I closed my eyes. The meditation is like, you're on a beach. The waves are crashing against the shore. This entity approaches you. It's your spirit guide. Well, I see this very angelic looking energy approaching me, but something felt bad about it. It looked in my mind's eye like, oh, that's beautiful, but something felt wrong. So I turned off the meditation right away. I was like, no, I don't need, that's not how the information comes to me. Do some people have spirit guides? Sure. But I don't think that's how I was designed to operate, and that's okay.
Right on. Well,
we're all different.
There are some very encouraging things happening in our reality right now. I think it's all about perspective. It's all about our individual and ultimately collective perspective as we move forward. But the more positivity we can bring in our lives and put out there, it's going to perpetuate. It's going to have this infectious effect on people, and that is the best thing we can do. One of the things that's occurred, of course, in the celebrity realms is the Diddy arrest. And if anything, I'm hoping that this will help people become aware that celebrities aren't heroes. And I think this will really speed up the death of the dark Hollywood occult and this celebrity worship that's permeated our culture for years. I think that it's all coming to the forefront, what all of this is really about, and I'm hoping people will start to realize that. Although we saw a little bit of this come out with the Epstein arrest, and we were hoping for a lot more to unfold, a lot more dominoes to fall, and nothing ever happened. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but at least, again, it's something else that falls down that opens people's eyes a little bit. It adds to what else is occurring, the awakening, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that situation, I would say, is the red pill for a few people, but there's still going to be, for lack of a better term, chickens with their heads down to the ground who are still worshiping celebrities, even after this. But whatever happens in that celebrity realm, whatever happens with the selection in November, is about awakening. It doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter who gets selected. I don't even want to think about it because it all drives me crazy, but it doesn't matter because either way, it is about destroying the old system and the old system destroying itself.
Right.
What are we focused on? You know, I definitely have from a distance kind of followed the Diddy thing, but I'm just like, well, how many decades have they known this is happening and it was allowed to continue? You know, I mean, and all the people, they know all the powerful people that have been a part of it and connected to it. I'm like, well, if you didn't wake up with Epstein, and some people still aren't going to wake up with this, that's okay. Maybe they're not going to. We're going to go create the new. And the new can be in full swing in a few years from now. And there will still be people masked up with their heads down, you know, and that's their journey. That's their journey, you know. Whether it's to serve the purposes of helping the rest of us awaken or whether it's to serve some other unknown purpose. Yeah. That's their journey, you know. Blinders on, mask up, stuck in the old paradigm.
The only way that this dark energy can survive is if we give it fuel. And our attention is its fuel. If we stop paying attention to it, if we no longer participate in what it's trying to put forward in any of the negative agendas, if we stop supporting poisoning our food, air, and water, and celebrities that are pedophiles, and all the negative systems that we give energy to, if we unplug from that and we take away the fuel for this system, it can no longer survive, and it's that simple.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. That is, if you don't take anything else away from today's podcast, take what Chris just said. We feed it with our attention. I learned that, I don't know if I ever told the story, probably did, but the scariest dark entity I ever sensed or encountered terrified me. And I felt it. And if I just thought of it even months after I had the encounter, I was still terrified and in fear. But I heard the voice of divine wisdom say to me, if you fear it, you feed it. If you don't fear it, you starve it. And I learned that quickly and applied it, and it actually worked. Like, I'm like, oh man, if I don't fear this, it has zero power. It's deflated. Same thing with, you're exactly right. If we feed this with our angst and our worry and our fear and our frustration and our anger and our judgment, oh, it just blows up. But if we don't participate, don't get caught up in the circus, don't get pulled down, don't let our frequency be brought down, then it deflates. It'll have some people to feed off of, but we don't have to feed it. We don't have to be a part of that. We're feeding. It's like the old story of what is it? The good wolf and the bad wolf. Which one do you feed?
Right on.
Which one do you feed?
Yeah. Right on, man. This was great information. Toby, thank you so much. Anything that you would like to close out on? Any final thoughts?
I think there are many who are listening to this who are very frustrated like me. Your gifts, your talents, your insights are needed. And there will be a time very soon where you're going to go, now it makes sense. Now I'm in my flow. I've hit my stride. I hear you in your pain and frustration. I feel you. I'm there. But don't give up, because we're turning the corner already and you're needed. So don't give up. Don't get caught up in the circus. I say that to myself too. And if you need any help, I have free meditations on YouTube. I also have one-on-one coaching sessions, and your audience can get a 25% discount. I've sent you that info. So I'd love to help you get unstuck, help you get to the root of any frustration or issues or struggles you're having. Get back on track with what you came here for. We're here to be the creators of the new.
Perfect. Toby, thank you so much. Before we let you go, let the audience know about that website and where they can get in touch with you.
www.shek, SHEK, holistic.com. It's like Shrek without the R, shekholistic.com. And I sent you a link that has the link to book a session and a coupon code FKN for Forbidden Knowledge News. FKN 25 saves you 25% off a 90-minute life path session. Awesome. And I'm also on Instagram at Shek Holistic, and I'm on Facebook, just Toby Gant, TOBYGANT.
Perfect. Toby, thank you so much. We'll definitely talk again in the future. And until next time, everyone, have a wonderful evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.